Hi everyone, I hope you're ready to find out what happens now. I wonder if Joe is going to see Lauren again. Chapter 21, a GCSE in makeup. Dad, screamed Joe. He had never been this angry before and hoped he never would be again. He ran into the pool room to confront his father. Mr. Spud nervously straightened his toupee as his son approached. Joe stood in front of his dad, hyperventilating. He was too angry to speak. I'm sorry, son. I thought that's what you wanted. A friend. I just wanted to make things better for you at school. I got that teacher you hated sacked too. All I had to do was buy the headmaster a motorbike. So you got an old lady sacked from her job and then you paid a girl to like me? I thought that's what you wanted. What? Listen, I can buy you another friend, said Mr. Spud. You don't get it, do you? Screamed Joe. Some things can't be bought. Like what? Like friendship, like feelings, like love. Actually, the last one can, offered Sapphire, still unable to lift her hand. I hate you, Dad, I really do, shouted Joe. Joe, please, pleaded Mr. Spud. Look, please calm down. How about a nice little cheque for 5 million quid? Oh, yes, please, said Sapphire. I don't want any more of your silly money, sneered Joe. But son, spluttered Mr. Spud, the last thing I want to do is end up like you, a middle-aged man with some brain-dead teenage fiancé. Excuse me, I've got a GCSE in makeup, said Sapphire angrily. I never want to see either of you again, said Joe. He ran out of the room, pushing the vomiting lady out of the way and into the pool as he did so. Then he slammed the huge door behind him. One of the mural tiles from Mr. Spud's fell off the wall and smashed onto the floor. Joe! Joe! Wait! Shouted Mr. Spud. Joe dodged past the hordes of guests and ran up to his room, shutting the door firmly behind him. There wasn't a lock, so he grabbed a chair and wedged it under the door handle so it wouldn't open. As the beat of the music thumped through the carpet, Joe grabbed a bag and started filling it with clothes. He didn't know where he was going, so wasn't sure what he needed. All he knew was that he didn't want to be in this ridiculous house for another minute. He grabbed a couple of his favourite books, The Boy in the Dress and Mr. Sink, both of which he found hilarious and yet heartwarming. Then he looked on his shelf at all his expensive toys and gadgets. His eyes were drawn to the little loo roll rocket that his dad had given him when he still worked at the factory. He remembered it was a present for his 8th birthday. His mum and dad were still together then, and Joe thought it might have been the last time he was truly happy. As his hand reached out to take it, there was a loud thump on the door. Son, let me in. Joe didn't say a word. He had nothing more he wanted to say to the man. Whoever his dad had been was lost years ago. Joe, please, said Mr. Spud. Then there was a pause. Thump. Joe's dad was trying to force the door open. Open this door. I've given you everything. He was putting all his weight behind it now, and the chair legs heroically dug themselves deeper into the carpet. He made one last try. Thump. Joe then heard a much smaller thump as his dad gave in and leaned his body against the door. This was followed by a squeak as his bulk slid down the door and a few whimpering cries. Then the light in the gap under the door was blocked. His dad must have been slumped on the floor. Spud Jr. felt unbelievably guilty. He knew all he needed to do to stop his dad's pain was open that door. He put his hand on the chair for a moment. If I open that door now, he thought, nothing is going to change. Joe took a deep breath, lifted his hand, grabbed his bag, and walked to the window. He opened it slowly so his dad wouldn't hear, and then climbed onto the windowsill. Joe took one last look at his bedroom before jumping out into the darkness and a new chapter. Chapter 22, a new chapter. Joe ran as fast as he could, which wasn't that fast in all honesty, but it felt fast to him. He ran down the long drive, dodged past the guards, jumped over the wall. Was that wall to keep people out or to keep him in? He'd never thought about it before. But there wasn't time to think about it now. Joe had to run and keep running. Joe didn't know where he was running to. All he knew was where he was running from. He couldn't live in that silly house with his silly dad for one moment longer. Joe ran down the road. All he could hear was his own breath, getting faster and faster. There was a faint taste of blood in his mouth. Now he wished he'd tried harder in the school cross-country run. It was late now, after midnight. The lamppost pointlessly illuminated the empty little town. Reaching the town centre, Joe slowed to a stop. A lone car crouched in the road. Realising he was alone, Joe suddenly felt a shiver of fear. The reality of his great escape dawned on him. He looked at his reflection in the window of the darkened KFC. A chubby 12-year-old boy with nowhere to go looked back at him. A police car rolled past slowly and silently. Was it looking for him? Joe hid behind the big plastic bin. The smell of ketchup and hot cardboard was so stomach-churning it almost made him choke. Joe covered his mouth to stifle the sound. He didn't want the policeman to discover him. The police car turned around a corner and Joe ventured into the street. Like a hamster that had escaped from its cage, he kept close to the edges and corners. Could he go to Bob's? No, thought Joe. In the exhilaration of meeting Lauren, or whatever her silly name was, he'd badly let down his only friend. Mrs. Trafe has been a sympathetic ear, but it turned out she was after his money all along. How about Raj? Yes, thought Joe. He could go and live with the purple-bottomed newsagent. Joe could set up camp behind the fridge. Hidden safely there, Joe could read Nuts magazine all day and feast on slightly out-of-date confectionery. He couldn't imagine a more charmed life. Joe's mind was racing, and soon his legs were too. He crossed the road and turned left. Raj's shop was only a few streets away now. Somewhere above him in the black air, he heard a distant whir. The whir became louder, more of a buzz, then a drone. It was a helicopter. A searchlight danced across the streets. Mr. Spud's voice came out of a loudspeaker. "Joe Spud, this is your dad speaking. Give yourself up. I repeat, give yourself up." Joe dashed into the entrance of the body shop. The searchlight had just missed him. The smell of pineapple and pomegranate body wash and dragon fruit foot scrub pleasingly tickled its way up his nostrils. Hearing the helicopter passing overhead, Joe dashed to the other side of the street and crept past Pizza Hut and then Pizza Express before sneaking sanctuary in the doorway of a Domino's Pizza. Just as he stepped out to make a dash past Bella Pasta, the helicopter whooshed back overhead. Suddenly, Joe Spud was caught in the dead centre of the searchlight. "Don't move! I repeat, don't move!" the voice thundered. Joe looked up into the light as his body began to tremble from the force of the rotor blades. "Shove off!" he shouted. "I repeat, shove off!" "Come home now, Joe." "No." "Joe, I said." "I heard what you said and I'm not coming home. I'm not ever coming home," shouted Joe. Standing there in the bright light, he felt like he was on stage in a particularly dramatic school play. The helicopter whirred overhead for a moment as the loudspeaker crackled in silence. Then Joe made a run for it, dashing down an alley behind Argos, through the NCP car park and round the back of Superdrug. Soon the helicopter was nothing more than a distant buzz, no louder than the sleepless birds. Arriving at Raj's, Joe knocked gently on the metal shutters. There was no answer, so he banged this time until the shutters shook with the force of his fists. Still, no answer. Joe looked at his watch. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. No wonder Raj wasn't in his shop. It looked like Joe was going to be the very first billionaire to ever sleep rough. Chapter 23. Canal Boat Weekly. "What are you doing in there?" Joe wasn't sure if he was awake or simply dreaming that he was awake. He certainly couldn't move. His body felt stiff with cold and every part of him ached. Joe couldn't open his eyes yet, but knew without doubt that he hadn't woken up between the silk sheets of his 4-poster bed. "I said, what are you doing in there?" came the voice again. Joe frowned, puzzled. Joe struggled to unglue his eyes that had been stuck together with sleep. He saw a big smiley face hovering over him. It was Raj's. "Why are you here at this ungodly hour, Master Spud?" asked the kindly newsagent. As dawn was beginning to glow through the gloom, Joe took in his surroundings. He climbed into a skip outside Raj's shop and fallen asleep. Some bricks had been his pillow, a piece of tarpaulin his duvet, and a dusty old wooden door his mattress. No wonder every part of his body ached. Ooh, I wonder what's going to happen. Do you think Joe will go back home again? Let's see tomorrow. Have a good day. Bye.